Hi, Bitcoiners. It's been a long time. Mark Berger here, your Bitcoin consultant, and we have a new all-time high in the Bitcoin price today, which is pretty exciting. It's been about 5 or 6 months since we had an all-time high right after the Trump inauguration, and we hit around $109,000, $500 a coin. So very exciting. But there's some other developments that I want to talk about that help explain why Bitcoin has reached this new all-time high. So earlier this week, we had the United States Congress um, basically agree to a new budget. And when I was working in the Senate, I advised my senator on budgetary and tax issues, and I covered the deficit and the debt quite closely. So I know this issue well. And I think the result is quite disappointing to those who are concerned about deficits and the debt. So we had a lot of expectations that Elon Musk would come in, creating the Department of Government Efficiency, and would eliminate a lot of wasteful spending, fraud, abuse, 200-year-old people receiving Social Security checks. And this would take about $1 trillion off of our annual deficit, which currently sits around $2 trillion, something like that. Well, the budget came out, and there's going to be no cut in government spending in the next fiscal year, and there'll be no cuts in government spending for the year after that. So it's really a nothing burger if you're concerned about fiscal responsibility, if you're concerned about the viability of the US government being able to pay its debts. They really missed the mark. Don't listen to the rhetoric. Look at the numbers that they're actually putting out there. So what does this mean, for you? What does this mean for Bitcoin? Well, confidence is shaken in the United States' ability to trim its spending. And this is what Jerome Powell said a number of years ago, is that United States spending is on a unsustainable path. And this is something that's beyond, the Fed's control, of course. The Fed can raise interest rates, can lower interest rates, but the Fed has really no say as to how much money the country spends. That's up to the Congress and the president, and ultimately the American people who elect them. So, why does this really concern us? Well, yesterday and today we saw a spike in interest rates on the open market for United States 20-year, 10-year, and 30-year Treasury bonds. So they're now at the highest level they've been since 2023. Now, this isn't catastrophic, but if you read the tea leaves and you kind of see what's happening here, there's clearly a loss of confidence in America's ability to pay back its debts to its bondholders. And at the same time, we have a real problem in Japan. Japan has long been a place for cheap money. Those companies and persons who are looking to borrow cheap money, they could borrow yen at like 0.5% and then take that money and invest it in the stock market or put that money into treasury bills or other investments. It was a source of cheap money for those who can get it. And that was called the yen carry trade. Well, now that that yen carry trade is kind of blowing up a little bit. And the interest rates on the government bonds in Japan are skyrocketing as well right now. And they have in Japan an even worse problem with the debt. So, what are you going to do when people lose confidence in government debt? Well, what happens traditionally is people take their capital and put it into hard assets. Traditionally, things like gold, silver, real estate, commodities, artwork, cars, even collectibles, stamps, things of this nature. But now we have a new outlet for capital that's seeking a safe place, and that is Bitcoin. And I think that's why we have seen the enormous rise, 40% in the last 6 weeks or so in Bitcoin, and why we're going to continue to see it. But I think this is just the opening scene in the larger collapse of debt, of sovereign debt, which is the debt held by countries. And countries like the United States, which is the largest, debt issuer in the world, it's backed by nothing anymore since 1971, since the US dollar is not backed by gold. It's simply backed by the full faith and credit of the United States. And with this deficit problem and with this debt problem that America has currently sitting at $36 trillion, that faith is being tested. And there's really no way out of this. As many observers have noted, nothing stops this debt train because the interest alone on $36 trillion worth of debt consumes about 1/4 of our yearly budget in the United States, or $1 trillion we have to pay in interest to pay back the bondholders who lent the United States money to run their deficits and to run a debt. And so, how long can you go paying trillion-dollar deficits? Well, as everyone knows, this is unsustainable. This is what Jerome Powell was talking about. The fiscal situation in the United States is unsustainable. So, how does this end? Well, many people have seen what's coming, and what will have to happen is the United States will have to print a lot of money, simply print it out of thin air, in order to pay back the bondholders and in order to simply keep the illusion alive. Now, there's a rumor going around that yesterday's Treasury auction of 20-year bonds went no bid, as they say. Now, no bid is basically saying you go out to the marketplace with what you're trying to sell, and there's no one there to buy it at any price. Now, this is a rumor, so we don't really know for sure, but I think there's some truth to it since bond rates have risen. And that's what you have to do. If you go out to the market and no one is willing to buy your product, well, what's the first thing you try to do? You lower the price. And that's what happens when you raise the interest rate. You're trying to entice bond buyers to come back if you give them a higher interest rate, a higher return on their loan of the money that you're giving them. So I think there's some truth to this, but this is a temporary solution. And of course, the long-term solution is that the United States and the Federal Reserve is simply going to print an enormous amount of money. They are going to hyper monetize the debt. They're going to print more money in order to pay, to pay down the bondholders and pay the interest on these bonds. And of course, what happens when you print money out of nothing? It creates inflation. And this is a real concern for everyone who's living in the world because the United States dollar is used for something like 50% of all transactions in the world. Um, and so this is a real threat. So there's a guy who wrote a really great book called The Big Print, and his name is Lawrence Lepard, and I got to meet him in Naples, Florida, this past February at a Bitcoin conference called Bitcoin Day. And this book is a really great read if you want to understand what is going to happen next in this debt problem of the United States and how the Federal Reserve is going to be involved and how we're going to print a ton of money and the ramifications that's going to have for your life and for your family and what we can do about it. Spoiler alert, to buy Bitcoin, of course, and other hard assets. But because Bitcoin is such a small percentage of the world economy right now, it has only a $2 trillion market capitalization. In other words, the total value of Bitcoin is only $2 trillion. And the market capitalization of gold is around 22 or $24 trillion. So gold is 10 times bigger than the value of Bitcoin right now. So I could easily see Bitcoin multiplying its value 10x from here. Now, this is not investment advice, but you can easily see a world where Bitcoin is valued equally as gold in an era where hard assets that can't be printed out of nothing, can't be created out of nothing, like gold and Bitcoin. You can see that this parity might come into play one day. Maybe not too far in the future, in fact. So this is something to definitely pay attention to. And if you don't have Bitcoin yet, you need to get Bitcoin and you need to hold it yourself. And this is what I'm here for. This is what I do for people. I teach people about Bitcoin and how to hold it, how to buy it, how to secure it, how to back it up, and then how to have a plan to pass it on to your heirs. Because Bitcoin is generational wealth. It's just not evenly distributed in the world yet. So please schedule a 30-minute free consultation on my website, and we can get talking about this. Now, um, there's other developments that are very interesting in the Bitcoin world. And many investors have figured out that Bitcoin is probably the best asset that's ever been created. And what they're doing is they are borrowing money at any, not any rate, but any way they can get it. And they're buying Bitcoin with it. And I'm talking about the CEOs of large publicly traded corporations. And this was started about 3 years ago by a company in the United States called MicroStrategy. And it it was really a nothing software business. I mean, it makes money, but it was a company that could never compete with the Magnificent Seven. So their CEO was looking for ways to how could they grow their company, and he tried every trick in the book. And of course, he couldn't grow his business more than 12% a year. And the Magnificent Seven, they're growing from 15 to 25% a year. And that's why all the money in the stock market, a majority of the money, is flowing into the Magnificent Seven. And that's why the Magnificent Seven accounts for like 70% of all gains in the S&P 500. So anyway, this CEO of MicroStrategy, he saw how the dollar is a melting ice cube. It's inflationary. It's losing value every year. And he had, I think, $100 million in the corporate treasury. And he said, why invest this into treasury bonds where we're getting 1 or 2%? And instead, we're going to put this money into Bitcoin because Bitcoin's compound annual growth rate for its lifetime is about 80% a year. 80% a year average growth rate compounded over the last 15 years. And that's exactly what he did. And then he figured out, well, you know what? If this works so well for our treasury, what if we go to the capital markets and start borrowing money to buy Bitcoin? And this was all above board. He let his shareholders know, he let the board know that this was his plan to get growth into his company's stock. And he has executed this. This is a summary, by the way. There's plenty of details on this. But this strategy works so well that his company, MicroStrategy, is the best performing stock on the stock market over the last 12 months, having gained about 150%. 150% gain for this stock because they transformed their company from a solid software business into something that just buys Bitcoin. That is their sole purpose now. They also have a software business that makes them money, and it's not insignificant. They make about $300 or $400 tomorrow, 300 or $400 million a year, and they plow that money into Bitcoin. So far, MicroStrategy has borrowed $6 billion, $6 billion to buy Bitcoin. That's what they've done. And the CEO says, we're going to buy more. So this is the strategy for everybody, not just large companies. If you can find ways to convert useless cash into Bitcoin, do it. If you can find ways to leverage equity in your company, buy Bitcoin and do it. And that leads to another opportunity that is here now. There is a company that I'm aware of that is offering to buy a percentage of your home if you own your home and take that equity, say 10% of your home, and they'll give you cash for it. Of course, they're going to take a lien position if you have a mortgage, and if not, they're going to put a lien on the house, but they're going to give you that money with the intent of buying Bitcoin. Now, might be too risky for some people, but if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. So this loan currently has what many would consider a very high interest rate of say 12 or 13% a year. Okay, that's a lot. But if you're going to put that money into an asset that returns you 20%, 30%, 40%, 50% a year, you're making money. You're profitable. So just subtract whatever the return of Bitcoin is during your hold period and subtract the interest rate, and that's your profit. So it's very simple, but it is risky because Bitcoin is volatile. But the good thing is that with the new all-time high today, I think we are in the final stages of this bull market. And we should see a blow off top, a run to new highs, much higher than we are today, sometime in the next 6 to 9 months. So there's a window of opportunity here, in my opinion, to take advantage of whatever cash or equity that you have and to buy Bitcoin with it. And please call me for a free consultation. Sign up on my website for a free consultation, and I'll walk you through the details of this exciting opportunity and the company behind it. I talked with them a week ago, and it's a very exciting opportunity if you're interested. So this is what's going on in the world. And MicroStrategy is not the only one, by the way, that's borrowing money in the debt markets to buy Bitcoin. There's another company out of Japan that is the highest, it, their shares are the highest traded stock in Japan right now. Today, their stock went up 60% today. There's another company in Europe, actually out of France. Same thing. They've borrowed 48 million euros with the sole intent of buying Bitcoin. Their stock is the biggest trading stock at the Paris Bourse. Other companies in the United States are getting into this. This is known as Bitcoin treasury companies. And if you want more information about this, set up a free call with me as well. I'll lead you through all the Bitcoin treasury companies. These are companies that you can buy in a stock brokerage account, something that you might be very familiar with, or in a 401k or a retirement plan. So set up an appointment with me to talk about this, and we'll go over all the details and the risks involved. But it's Bitcoin backed. And this is what the world is figuring out, is that if you can get your hands on the hardest money humans have ever created, you need to do it, especially if you can trade nearly worthless pieces of paper that are created out of nothing, the US dollar. If you can trade imaginary money for hard money, in the long run, you're going to make a lot of money. You're going to have a lot of gains. So that's a lot, but very exciting times. And tomorrow is pizza day here. Not here, but around the world. It's pizza day, where we celebrate the very first real world transaction of Bitcoin, where a man paid for two Papa John pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin. 10,000 Bitcoins for two cheese pizzas, no toppings. That was a $1 billion pizza purchase in today's money. So we celebrate that, and we celebrate Bitcoin as the invention that it is, that is the hardest money ever created, deflationary by design, designed to go up in value forever. And that is the truth. All right. Have a great week, everybody. And I look forward to hearing from a lot of you. Bye now.